So what would you say, Vafa, has been the largest or most exciting project that you have worked on whilst at TBH?
Well, it's not one that I worked on directly, but as I said, when I first started, I was given an opportunity to look into the Perth Museum. And that was a big development that was going on, looking at heritage buildings as well as a new development around that precinct. That was pretty exciting to see what happens on site as well as the size of a project like that and what are the steps and control measures that you need to put into place. So that was probably one of the most exciting things that I worked on briefly. How about yourself?
I think the largest one I've ever worked on was when I first started, so work experience, and I've come in onto a billion-dollar hospital, the Royal Adelaide Hospital, which you might have heard of.
Yes, heard of it.
Yeah, coming in and getting to work on a project like that was very cool, seeing the inner workings of how things happen and all the things that you just don't think about when you're not actually in that environment, and got to go and have a site walk. So walked around the hospital while it was like pretty much nearly done, but still construction, and yeah, just how it all comes together and how these big mega projects happen. It's incredible to me. It still is, and I get to work in it every day, which is very cool.
That's awesome. We're so lucky to be able to be exposed to small projects as well as large projects at TBH.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of opportunities at TBH, have you, I know that I've seen you in Perth a couple of times while you were working on some stuff. What other opportunities have you had to travel interstate or overseas?
Traveling, I travel a lot with TBH. So like you said, I was in Perth last year for the first few months working on a job there. I've also been to Alice Springs. So I flew to Alice Springs. I got in a car and I drove 250 k's into the middle of the desert to do a job out there, which is very cool. I've also been to Gladstone, which is in regional Queensland. So I got on a plane to Brisbane and then a tiny plane to Gladstone. And I've worked in Sydney and I've worked in Melbourne and like Perth, like you said. So if you're willing to, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to travel with TBH and see lots of different kinds of projects in different places, which is something that I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to do. What about you? Have you done much travel?
I've done lots of travel, but nothing to do with TBH, to be honest.
Okay.
But yeah, I've seen the opportunities that have come up. Sometimes we get emails about, I know we opened an office in Dubai recently, and they were looking for some staff at some point. I've been in a position where I've been quite comfortable in Perth, so they've been able to accommodate that, but they always offer opportunities to go into state, even for short stints. It doesn't necessarily have to be permanently. It's more of, there might be a project that you can work on there. I know some people that have worked in Canberra, and I know some other people that have worked in Melbourne. So it's a cool place to be if you want to move around a little bit.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, we do have the Dubai office, and we've got Hong Kong and Singapore, and I've known of people who have gone to New Zealand to do jobs, and we don't have an office there, but if the job comes up and the opportunity's there, then TBH will definitely go for it and definitely put people forward for it who are keen to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I guess if we talk a bit about the technical side of what we do, what software do you spend the most time in, do you think?
Well, I guess the Office apps is probably a given. You're looking at your Outlook emails and things like that. I guess that's like the baseline of everything. But from there's a lot of P6, which is Primavera 6, which is a scheduling software. A lot of our clients often use P6, and so I've gotten a fair bit of experience with that, which has been pretty nice. Yeah, how about yourself?
Well, I constantly have probably at least 5 Excel worksheets open at a time. So I spend a lot of time in Excel. P6, like you said, Microsoft Project, which is the Microsoft version of the scheduling software. We use that quite a bit as well. And then cost management tools. And that really depends from client to client what they like and what their systems are built on. So it's, not uncommon to go into a job and pick up a new software as you go, which is good as well, because you have the skills and the knowledge to know what you need to do, and then you get to learn how to do it in a new software. So you end up with a plethora of softwares that you're competent in, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. We've definitely been exposed to so many more pieces of software than I ever thought I would be.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
what do you find that you use those softwares for? Like, what's the type of work that you do on a weekly or a daily basis?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So this week I have been updating a plan for a piece of construction work. So something was, for example, like meant to be built next week. It's not going to happen because a part hasn't
Mhm.
arrived in time for that work to happen. So it's going to be done the week after. And I'm in the process of figuring out, will that delay the whole project, or will we be able to get that little bit done a week later and then
Yeah.
that's all fine. How much extra will it cost? Will we need to keep project managers on for longer if it takes longer? That kind of thing. So it's sort of, yeah, planning construction, this particular thing is planning construction work and what that looks like, and also how much that will cost. So time and cost are very much intertwined in the role that I'm doing at the moment, and working out how the time will affect the cost and vice versa. So that's what I've been doing a lot this week. What about you?
Well, my week's been a little bit similar in that I'm looking at a project and there's a certain amount of welds that need to take place on a day.
Mm-hmm.
So we've looked at their current progress of how many welds they've completed, and we're trying to extrapolate to see if they'll be able to get it done in time, and if they won't be able to, what effect that might have on the project. So in that respect, I guess that's kind of similar to what you've been doing. But it has been more of like an analysis rather than just looking at the program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at the program and glean some insights about, you know, the progress to date, but then once you get that information, you know, you take it away and you start to extrapolate and use different methods to be able to figure out, well, what are they going to achieve. So that's been this week, and I think earlier in the week I spent a little bit of time looking at a claim and refining a cost model that we put together.
Mm-hmm.
So that was looking at all of the resources, so that's labor as well as materials that were used on a site. And then there was an instruction that may have changed the way that they're going to do the job, like the methodology. So we take a little splice of the cost model and say, okay, well, between this month and this month, there was an extra amount of work that needed to be done, and that cost an extra amount. So being
Mm-hmm.
able to put together a cost model to represent an extra scope of work is something that we've had to, do this week, which is actually something that I kind of enjoy doing.
Yeah, I like working on claims as well. That sort of forensic analysis where you sometimes just get given a whole heap of things that happened in the
Yeah,
past, and then you have to go through it and be like, what happened? And did this happen or did
yeah.
this happen? And looking for the evidence. Like, you're a bit of a detective. It's very cool.
Yeah, that's definitely a part that I really like, is when someone's not told you the whole truth and you get to go and find out what the whole truth is.
Yeah, they're like, no, it was the rain's fault. And you're like, it was not the rain's fault.
It was definitely not the rain. It very rarely is the rain's fault, I've decided.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So what type of sort of projects and industries do you work across? So we've both talked a bit about construction. Is there
Mm.
any other industries that you've dabbled in?
The mining sector is a big part of our work, and looking at the dispute resolution between that, as well as planning, as well as the government sector, which is where a decent amount of work will come through. And that can be anything from a hospital to looking at the financial models they're using for the Department of Housing and how they can distribute that fund in a more effective way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how about yourself? What kind of industries have you worked in?
Well, currently I'm working with a mining company. So my project's actually based in Papua New Guinea on an not active volcano, but still sort of geothermically warm volcano, which is kind of cool. Um, but I've also worked in like a lot of construction. I've done defense jobs, so getting to work with the big sort of warship frigates. I did that last year while I was in Perth. I've also worked on hospitals, like Royal Adelaide Hospital, some various other ones. I've worked, where else have I worked? I worked on education projects, so things like schools and universities. I've done ICT projects as well, so they're a bit different because that's not necessarily a physical thing that someone's building. Sometimes it's a software rollout or like a new website or things like that as well, which is
Cool.
yeah, so that's definitely a different way of thinking about planning and scheduling. It doesn't necessarily always just have to be a road or a building. It can sometimes be a software package or like a planning study or something like that.
That's awesome. Sounds like you've been across a lot of different projects.
Yeah,
I was just thinking about some of the challenges that you might have experienced while you've been on those jobs and how you've been able to overcome them.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of the biggest challenges I've had have been when I've gone to some of these remote places that I've traveled to. And you're like, typically I go by myself. So I've got to rely on my team that I can reach online. And if any questions come up that I'm not necessarily sure about, then I know that I can lean on my TBH colleagues, and it's just about that communication and asking for help when you need it. That's really important. But yeah, you can find yourself sometimes in situations where you're like, oh, I'm not quite sure I'm experienced enough to know the answer to this.
Yeah.
But you can always just lean back on your colleagues and say, oh, hey, like, what would you do in this situation? And yeah, they're always there to help you out. So I think that's probably biggest challenges I've had. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's similar. Sometimes you're on a job and you start to question, what's the right thing to do, or with the information that I have, what would be the most effective way to tackle it? And I think you nailed it, where whenever you go onto a site or whenever you're on a project, you're often given someone that you can reach out to. You've got your friends as well as people that are more, are going to be very skilled in what you're doing. So being able to call back to base and being like, okay, this is the situation. These are the variables that I have. What do you think the best course of action is? And they'll often, most of the time they'll encourage you with your gut instinct, because it's normally the right thing to do, but it's nice to have that reassurance from somebody who's been doing it for a lot longer than we have.
Yeah, it's nice to just be able to say, oh, I've come across this. I think this. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you want to add anything? And just bounce those ideas off of them.
Yeah, it's awesome. And there's also so many templates and resources that we have that we can, kind of rely on. Like for almost every task, someone's made a template for it, which we can use.
Or someone's worked on a job that was similar, or because we just have such a wealth of experience here. Like we've had people in the company for their whole working careers, and just the knowledge that they have is unbelievable.
Yeah, we're so lucky.
Mm-hmm. So what's your favorite part about your work? What do you like the most?
I think my favorite part is the people. The people that I work with are always so helpful, and I'm so grateful to have them as my peers. And the second part is the ability to have new work coming in. So if you're on a job that you really like, it's for a short period of time and you get to enjoy it. And if you're on a different job that might have more challenging aspects, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So it's for a short period and you can move on. So I really like that high flow and high intensity aspect of the job, because it means that we're able to be exposed to so many different things and you're always on your toes, and the days go so fast because it's not like a day where you're doing the same thing 1,000 times. You're normally doing something new with someone new.
Yeah, so you like the versatility of a consultancy and the different jobs available to you.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that, I don't think we can get that experience anywhere else. How about yourself?
I love the variety. I love working on different jobs and different industries and different services. I love the opportunity to travel. I love going different places, and I love meeting different people, and I feel like that's how I learn. That's how I grow the most, is getting the opportunity to learn from others and experience different ways of doing things. And I get the opportunity to do that here often. And like you said, just the people. I love working here. I feel like a valued part of the team. I feel like my voice matters and that I can make a difference in not just the work that I'm doing, but also the growth of TBH as a company.
Definitely.
Yeah.